Can I fix it for food?
The night air buzzed with neon lights from the diner's sign, casting broken shadows on the cracked sidewalk. A battered old sedan sat dead at the curb, hood propped open, steam hissing like a wounded animal. A small crowd had gathered, 2 young men in pressed shirts, a woman scrolling on her phone, and a cook on his smoke break, each wearing the same smirk of disdain. Across the street, a man in torn clothes shuffled forward. His shoes were split at the soles, jacket hanging loose, face weathered by nights under bridges. He carried no tools, only a quiet dignity buried under layers of exhaustion. "Can I fix it?" His voice broke the silence. It wasn't loud, almost gentle, like he was asking permission to exist. Then softer, almost swallowed by the sound of traffic. "Just for some food." The young man leaning on the car burst out laughing. "You? Fix this? Man, you don't even got a wrench. Get out of here." His friend snorted, pulling out his phone to film. "This is gold. Mr. Mechanic for a meal." The homeless man didn't flinch at the mockery. His eyes stayed on the engine, tracing the lines with a gaze that wasn't casual. It was focused, alive. The kind of look of someone who had spent years chasing speed, reading engines like other men read newspapers. The cook from the diner shook his head. "Y'all cruel, man's just hungry." But the woman with the phone chimed in coldly. "If he was any good, he wouldn't be out here begging." The homeless man stepped closer, ignoring the sting of the words. His hands, scarred, oil-stained despite months without a shop, hovered over the engine like a pianist remembering a forgotten song. He inhaled sharply, eyes lighting with recognition. "It's the fuel line, and your plugs are burnt out. 10 minutes. I can make it run." Laughter rippled again, but one voice cut through. The cook, arms folded. 10 minutes, huh? Let him try. Worst case, he wastes time. Best case, y'all eat your words." The crowd shifted, curious now. Phones were raised higher, recording every second. The homeless man exhaled, almost whispering to himself. "Haven't lost it yet." And in that moment, just a flicker, his posture changed. Shoulders squared, hands steady, like he wasn't just a man scraping by for a sandwich, but someone who had once lived for roaring engines and victory laps. The cook caught it. He frowned, studying the stranger with a mix of doubt and respect. "Who are you, man?" The homeless man didn't answer. He only reached for the hood latch with a confidence that made the laughter fade into silence. The crowd leaned in closer, their smirks fading into something sharper. Curiosity mixed with the thrill of watching a gamble. The homeless man removed his ragged jacket, folded it carefully and laid it on the curb as if it was something precious. Underneath, his arms were wiry, sinewed, and carried the strength of a man who had spent years twisting bolts and gripping steering wheels. The owner of the sedan crossed his arms. "All right, show us, old man. But you touch anything that breaks, you're paying." He smirked at his own joke, knowing full well the man had nothing. The homeless man didn't rise to the bait. He peered into the engine, fingertips brushing over tubes and wires, his movements quick but precise. He tugged a loose fuel line free with the care of a surgeon, then wiped it with the frayed edge of his sleeve. The woman filming scoffed. "Look at him, wiping an engine part with his shirt. This is tragic." But the cook's eyes narrowed. He'd seen shade tree mechanics before, guys who guessed their way around an engine. This wasn't guessing. The homeless man moved with certainty, diagnosing each sound, each smell. "Spark plugs," the man muttered. "Borrow me a lighter." The cook handed his over. A small flame danced in the night air. With practiced movements, the man cleaned the plugs, rotating them in his rough hands as if restoring something delicate. Then he tightened them back, each twist fluid, confident. "Who taught you that?" the cook asked quietly. The man's eyes flickered, but he didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the carburetor with nothing but a flattened soda tab he'd picked off the street. The crowd chuckled again, but their laughter was softer now, uncertain. Then came the moment. He climbed into the driver's seat of the dead sedan. The seat groaned under him, springs digging into his back, but he sat like he belonged there. He took a deep breath, hands steady on the wheel, and turned the key. The engine coughed. Once, twice. Then roared alive with a guttural growl, smooth and deep like a beast awakening. The headlights flared, bathing the stunned faces in pale yellow. Gasps erupted. The young man who owned the car nearly dropped his phone. No way. That thing's been dead for a week. The cook whistled low. Man wasn't bluffing. The homeless man eased out of the car, shoulders sagging now, exhaustion settling back in. But his eyes, dark, steady, carried a fire that hadn't been there minutes before. He looked at the owner. A deal's a deal, a plate of food. That's all I asked. The cook threw his cigarette to the ground and crushed it out. I'll get him something. But the woman with the phone wasn't satisfied. Wait, who are you really? No guy on the street fixes an engine like that. You look like you've done this before. The homeless man's jaw clenched, his silence saying more than words. For the briefest second, his hand curled as if holding a phantom steering wheel. And in that gesture lay a lifetime of races, checkered flags and roaring crowds long gone. The cook saw it. His eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. He whispered under his breath, half to himself, "Nah, it can't be him." The engine still hummed steady in the background, but now the real noise was the silence of the crowd. Uneasy, waiting, sensing they had mocked a man whose story was far bigger than his torn clothes. And the cook, leaning closer, said louder this time, "Tell me I'm not crazy. But I've seen you before, haven't I?" The homeless man didn't answer. He just pulled his jacket back on and looked at the glowing diner sign, as if the food meant less than the memories clawing their way back to the surface. The sedan purred at the curb like it had never been broken, while the small crowd shifted awkwardly. The owner stood speechless, his pride wounded more than his car had ever been. The cook returned from the diner with a steaming plate. Fries piled high, a burger dripping with grease, and a paper cup of soda. He placed it gently on the hood. "Here," the cook said, "a deal's a deal." The homeless man's hands trembled as he picked up the plate. He whispered, almost reverent, "Thank you." He sat on the sidewalk, cross-legged like a child, eating with quiet hunger but deliberate bites, as though every chew was a memory of better days. Phones were still recording. The woman zoomed in, her tone less mocking now, more intrigued. "This is crazy. Dude, the way he touched that engine, that wasn't random. That was muscle memory. He's somebody." The younger man frowned, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, but who?" The cook leaned against the diner's brick wall, watching the man eat. There was something in the way he sat, the curve of his back, the steady calm in his posture. It wasn't just survival. It was discipline. He had seen that same presence years ago on TV screens and smoky bars where men cheered at roaring cars flying past the finish line. "Wait," the cook murmured. "Hold up." He pushed off the wall, stepping closer. "You raced, didn't you?" The homeless man paused mid-bite. The world seemed to still around him. His jaw worked slowly as he swallowed, but his eyes avoided the cook's. "You were on those tracks," the cook pressed. "Talladega, Daytona maybe?" "No, not just local tracks, big ones. I remember that face under a helmet." The crowd exchanged glances, whispers rising. The woman scrolled furiously through her phone, pulling up old racing videos. Hold on, hold on." She turned the screen toward the group, pausing on a grainy clip from years ago. A black driver, lean and sharp, climbing out of a car covered in sponsor stickers. Helmet tucked under one arm, victory smile beaming as the crowd went wild. She held the phone beside the man's face. Even weathered by time, even softened by hunger and years on the street, the resemblance was undeniable. Gasps spread through the group. The young owner of the sedan stepped back. No way, that's him?" The cook's voice was low, almost reverent. "Marcus Cole, the Lightning? Man, you broke records back in the day." The homeless man, Marcus, closed his eyes, his fork clattering softly against the plate. His lips pressed together in a line of pain. He didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. But the silence was enough. The woman lowered her phone, her earlier mockery burned away by awe. You're a legend. What happened to you?" Marcus lifted his gaze then. His eyes weren't angry, they weren't ashamed. They were tired. Tired of the weight of questions. Tired of the years that had erased his glory and replaced it with hunger. "Engines don't judge," he said finally, his voice rough. "People do." The words hung heavy in the night. The cook swallowed hard while the crowd fell into a hush. They had mocked him for his hunger, his rags, his place on the sidewalk. But sitting there, with grease-stained hands and eyes that had seen the world at 200 miles per hour, Marcus Cole was no longer just a homeless man. He was a fallen champion, and for the first time, the young man whose car he had fixed couldn't look him in the eye. The name Marcus Cole spread among the small circle like a spark catching dry leaves. The woman with the phone whispered it again, tasting the syllables as though they belonged to another world. The cook stared hard, memories flashing in his mind. Late-night reruns of races, that same man climbing onto car roofs, fists raised high while announcers screamed his victory. But here he was, eating fries off a paper plate on a cracked sidewalk. Marcus lowered his head, the shadows of the neon diner sign cutting across his face. He set the plate aside even though half the burger still sat untouched. His hands folded together, rough knuckles pressing into each other until his skin whitened. "You shouldn't say that name out loud," Marcus muttered. His voice wasn't bitter, but it carried the heaviness of someone who had tried for years to bury the past. The young owner of the sedan finally found his tongue. "Why? Man, if I were you, I'd be bragging. You were on TV. You were famous." Marcus looked at him. Really looked, and the boy faltered. Those eyes weren't the eyes of someone hungry for attention. They were eyes that had seen something shatter. "I had it all," Marcus said quietly. "Speed, sponsors, glory." Then one turn, and it was gone. The cook frowned. "The crash." Marcus nodded slowly. His gaze drifted toward the street as though replaying a memory that still burned bright. Daytona, last lap. Tire blew at 190. Car flipped 3 times before the wall stopped it. The woman gasped, remembering headlines she had half forgotten. "I saw that clip. Everyone thought you were dead," Marcus finished for her. His voice was flat. "I should have been. They pulled me out with broken ribs, shattered leg, and a spine they said would never hold steady again. I spent a year learning how to walk. By the time I could run, my seat was gone, my sponsors gone, and my name..." He let out a bitter laugh. "My name was just a reminder of a man who couldn't finish." The silence that followed was sharp. Even the hiss of the diner's fryer inside seemed to hush. The cook scratched his chin. "That's why you disappeared. One day you were on every billboard, and then... nothing." Marcus shifted, pulling his tattered jacket tighter. The bills piled up. Hospital, rehab. Family couldn't carry it all. I tried. God knows I tried. But one bad deal, one wrong crowd? His words trailed off. He didn't need to finish. The fragments were enough to paint the picture. The young man who owned the sedan shifted uncomfortably. His earlier arrogance drained from his face, leaving only shame. He muttered almost to himself. "We laughed at him. A legend." Marcus shook his head. "Don't pity me. The track gave me everything. Took everything, too. That's the trade." The woman lowered her phone at last, her hands trembling slightly. "Then why fix our car? Why still do it?" Marcus's eyes softened, the faintest flicker of something warmer breaking through the exhaustion. "Engines still talk to me. They don't care if I'm on a podium or on the street. A machine only asks one thing: if you listen." The cook let out a low breath. He wasn't looking at a homeless man anymore. He was looking at a racer whose body had been broken, but whose soul still burned like an engine refusing to die. Behind them, the sedan idled, steady and strong, as if echoing Marcus's words. The cook turned toward the crowd, his voice gruff but steady. "Y'all got your videos, your laughs. But you just saw more than that. You saw what real skill looks like. Respect it." The group shifted uneasily, shame painting their faces. None dared laugh now. And Marcus, gathering the last of his fries, looked up at the night sky where the stars flickered faintly. Like headlights far away on a track only he could still see. The sedan's engine hummed softly, a reminder of what Marcus had just accomplished. The small group lingered, caught between awe and disbelief, as if they were waiting for some hidden camera crew to pop out and confirm this was all staged. The young man who owned the car shoved his hands into his pockets, his earlier bravado crumbling. Still, pride stung his voice. "Okay, so you got lucky. Anyone could have fiddled with a spark plug." The cook's glare cut sharp. "Boy, that wasn't luck. That was craft. You don't see the difference?" But the young man wasn't ready to surrender his ego. He circled the sedan, eyes narrowing. "Fine, let's see if this guy's really who you say he is. I got another test." The woman arched a brow. "Another?" He pointed down the street where a sleek sports car, a cherry red Mustang, sat parked under a flickering streetlight. "That's my brother's ride. Been acting up for months. No one's been able to tune it right. If this guy's a legend like you all claim, let's see him make that purr." A murmur rippled through the group. The cook frowned. That ain't fair, he already proved himself. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He set the empty plate aside and rose to his feet, his jacket slipping from one shoulder. His movements carried a stiffness, the echo of old injuries, but also a steadiness that silenced doubt. "Show me," Marcus said simply. The young man smirked, leading the way down the block. Phones followed, recording every step. The night felt charged, each footfall echoing like the build-up to a race. The Mustang gleamed beneath the streetlight, its hood already dented from frustrated fists. The young man crossed his arms. "All right, champ. Let's see if you can handle something built for speed." Marcus laid a hand on the hood, eyes closing briefly as though feeling the heartbeat of the machine. He popped it open, revealing a nest of wires, a tangled mess of modifications gone wrong. His lips pressed into a line, part disapproval, part challenge. "You've been chasing horsepower without balance," Marcus murmured. "Forced air intake wrong, ECU tuned sloppy. No wonder she coughs like a smoker." The cook leaned in, impressed. "You can tell that just by looking." Marcus nodded faintly. "Engines don't lie." With no tools but a stray screwdriver left in the trunk in his own hands, Marcus set to work. His motions were slower this time, his legs stiff, his back aching, but the precision was undeniable. Every turn of his wrist was like a page from a manual only he could read. The woman filming whispered, almost reverent now, "He's not just fixing it, he's listening to it." Minutes passed. Then Marcus slid into the driver's seat, the cracked leather sighing under his weight. He turned the key. The Mustang roared to life. Not sputtering, not coughing, but a clean, guttural growl that vibrated through the pavement. It was no longer a wounded beast. It was a predator awake. Gasps erupted. The young man's jaw dropped, pride collapsing under the weight of proof. That car's never sounded like that." Marcus stepped out slowly, handing the keys back. "Treat her right. Speed without respect kills." The cook clapped once, shaking his head in disbelief. "Man, you just schooled half the mechanics in this town." The crowd had grown, strangers drawn by the sound of the Mustang's rebirth. More phones lifted, more whispers spread. Who is he? Is that really Marcus Cole? The Lightning himself? And for the first time that night, Marcus stood not as a beggar on the sidewalk, but as the man he once was. A racer whose touch could tame engines, whose very presence made machines sing. But even as awe spread around him, Marcus's gaze stayed distant, locked on the horizon where headlights blurred like memories he could never chase again. By the time the Mustang settled into a smooth idle, the small crowd had doubled. Diners wandered out, drawn by the engine's growl. 2 delivery bikers pulled over, helmets still on, watching with wide eyes. And everywhere phones stayed raised, recording, streaming, posting. The woman who had mocked first was now narrating breathlessly into her camera. "You guys, you won't believe this. A homeless man, yes, homeless, just fixed a Mustang with his bare hands. And he's not just anybody. They say he's Marcus Cole, the Lightning." The cook waved a hand. "Hey, put that down. Man doesn't need the world in his face." But it was too late. Notifications buzzed instantly. Videos tagged Ziddy Marcus Cole, racing legend. From Street 2 track began to bounce across social feeds. Clips of him whispering, "Engines don't lie," caught fire like a mantra. Marcus himself stood apart, leaning against the Mustang, jacket pulled close. He didn't glow under the streetlight. He shrank from it. Fame had once been his fire. Now it felt like exposure. The young man whose pride had sparked the second test scrolled through his own feed. His jaw tightened. "It's blowing up. Look, already hundreds of shares." The cook shot him a look. "And what? You think that's a good thing? This man asked for food, not a spotlight." The crowd parted slightly as an older man approached. A mechanic from down the block, grease still staining his coveralls. He squinted at Marcus, eyes narrowing with recognition. "No, can't be," he muttered. "Marcus Cole? The Lightning? I watched you race Talladega in M09. You passed 3 cars on the final lap. That was you." Marcus's shoulders slumped, caught between denial and truth. "That was another lifetime." The mechanic shook his head. Legends don't fade, son. They just get buried under dust. Gasps and whispers rippled. Some people clapped, others stared in disbelief. The phones never stopped recording. The woman edged closer, her voice almost pleading. If you are him, if you really are Marcus Cole, why are you out here? Marcus's gaze drifted past them to the glow of the diner window, where a family laughed around a booth. His voice was low, but every word carried. I crashed harder than any car I ever drove. Not just my body, my life. Sponsors gone, family gone. By the time I stood back up, there was no track left to run on. And the world? It moved on. The cook's jaw tightened. Maybe the world moved on. Doesn't mean you're done. But Marcus only shook his head, a faint smile tugging the corner of his lips. Engines forgive, people don't. At that moment, a car screeched around the corner, a black SUV with tinted windows. It slowed as it approached, headlights flooding the crowd. Inside, faces were shadowed, but one leaned forward staring out the passenger window. Recognition flickered there. The SUV idled for a beat, then rolled past, disappearing into the night. Marcus stiffened, watching it until it was gone. His hand flexed, the phantom grip of a steering wheel curling tight. The cook noticed. You know them? Marcus exhaled sharply. I used to. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Phones buzzed with fresh pings. Somewhere far beyond this cracked sidewalk, the past Marcus had tried to bury had just been cracked open. And whether he wanted it or not, the world was beginning to remember the lightning. The street emptied slowly after the Mustang test, but the buzz didn't fade. Clips of Marcus were already spinning through the city, reaching people who hadn't heard his name in a decade. He could feel it, the weight of recognition pressing in again. The cook stayed close, arms folded, watching Marcus pick at the last of the fries as though the food might vanish if he let it sit too long. That SUV, the cook finally said. You knew them, didn't you? Marcus didn't look up. His jaw flexed, words dragging out like gravel. Old sponsors, old friends, depends who you ask. The young man scoffed, still stung from being proven wrong. What, they kicked you out after the crash? And now they're back to... What, laugh at you? Marcus's eyes lifted, steady and dark. They didn't laugh, not them. They watched, that's worse. The cook frowned. Why? Marcus set the plate aside, his hands tightening into fists on his knees. Because watching means remembering, and if they remember me, it means they might drag me back. Before the cook could press, a voice cut through the night. Marcus? Everyone turned. A woman stepped into the glow of the diner's sign, her heels clicking on the sidewalk. She was polished, sharp black coat, hair pinned tight, phone glowing in her hand. Her eyes locked on Marcus with a mix of disbelief and sorrow. Marcus froze, his lips parted but no sound came. The cook raised a brow. Friend of yours? The woman ignored him. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I saw the videos. I didn't want to believe it until I saw you myself. Marcus shifted, his weight uneven on his bad leg. You shouldn't be here, Claire. A ripple went through the small crowd. This wasn't just a random recognition. This was someone from the inner circle, someone who carried pieces of his past. Claire's eyes glistened under the streetlight. Marcus, they know now. The team, the investors, the world. You can't hide again. The cook glanced between them. Wait, investors? Team? What's this about? Claire ignored him. She knelt slightly, bringing her face closer to Marcus's. You were a champion, Marcus. You still are. They'll want you back. Not behind the wheel maybe, but in the spotlight. Spokesman, symbol, they'll pay. The words landed heavy. The crowd leaned in, hungry for the answer. Marcus shook his head slowly. Spotlight burned me once. I'm not stepping into it again. But Claire's voice hardened. You don't have a choice. That SUV that rolled by, they weren't just watching, they were scouting. If you don't tell your story, they'll tell it for you. The cook caught the flicker of fear in Marcus's eyes. For the first time that night, the racer who had seemed unshakable looked cornered, not by engines, but by people. Phones lifted again, catching every angle. The world wasn't just remembering Marcus Cole. The world was coming for him. And as Claire straightened, her voice cold but urgent, she said the words that made Marcus's chest tighten like the strap of an old harness. Lightning doesn't die, Marcus. It just waits for the storm. Marcus sat still, the weight of Claire's words pressing down harder than any roll cage ever had. The crowd around him buzzed with low whispers, phones raised high, their screens glowing like a ring of headlights trapping him on a track he hadn't chosen. The cook stepped forward, waving a hand. "Enough! Man asked for food, not fame. Y'all turning this into a circus." But Claire didn't flinch. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she stood taller. "You don't understand. Marcus was bigger than the cars he drove. He was the sport. And now, people want a comeback story." Marcus finally rose, his jacket slipping off one shoulder, his limp more visible under the neon light. He looked at her with eyes that carried both fire and fatigue. "They want a story, Claire, not the truth. And I've lived with the truth every night since that crash." The woman with the phone, who had filmed since the beginning, lowered it slowly. For once, she wasn't thinking of views or clicks. "What's the truth, then?" Marcus's voice was gravel, but it carried through the street. "That glory fades. That people cheer your name one day and forget it the next. That when you fall, no one comes to pick you up." He glanced at the cook, then at the untouched half of his burger. "Except maybe a stranger." The cook grunted, looking away as if embarrassed. But Claire's voice cut sharp, refusing to let him sink back into obscurity. "Marcus, you can't hide anymore. Videos like this?" She gestured at the phones surrounding them. "They don't go away. You're already viral." The crowd screens lit up with fresh notifications. His name trending, clips flooding feeds, headlines forming, the lightning found on the streets. Marcus rubbed his temples, the hum of engines from memory colliding with the noise of the present. He felt the track pulling at him again. The roar of crowds, the burn of rubber, the surge of speed. The cook placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it ain't about hiding or chasing fame. Maybe it's about owning your story before somebody else twists it." Marcus breathed deep, steadying himself. For the first time, he didn't look like a man running from ghosts. He looked like a racer at the starting line, waiting for the green light. His eyes scanned the crowd, pausing on the woman still clutching her phone. "If you're gonna record," he said, his tone cutting, "then you better hear this too." Phone steadied, silence spread. Marcus lifted his chin. "I am Marcus Cole. I was the lightning, and I lost everything. But engines don't lie, and neither do second chances." The crowd erupted, gasps, cheers, disbelief. Claire's lips parted in a triumphant smile. Marcus stepped back, pulling his jacket tight. His voice softened, almost weary now. "But if the world wants to know the rest, they're gonna have to stick around. 'Cause my story ain't done." The cook grinned faintly. "Guess you just dropped your first cliffhanger." Stories like Marcus's remind us how quickly life can turn and how dignity hides in places we least expect. If you want to see how this journey unfolds, don't miss the next part. Like, subscribe, and share, because this legend isn't finished yet. By dawn, the diner's neon glow had gone out, replaced by the first pale strokes of sunlight. The street was quieter now, but Marcus wasn't. He hadn't slept. Too many headlights from memory still circled in his mind, replaying races he both won and lost. Claire hadn't left either. She stood near the Mustang, phone pressed to her ear, voice clipped and urgent. The cook wiped down a table outside, pretending not to listen, though every word seemed to hang in the air. "They saw the videos," Claire said, lowering her tone, but not enough. "Yes, viral. Everyone's talking." "No, he hasn't agreed yet, but he will." Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't need to hear more. He already knew. The cook set down his rag. "She's calling the suits, huh?" Marcus nodded once. "And the wolves will follow the scent." As if on cue, the black SUV returned, this time rolling to a stop right in front of the diner. Doors opened, and two men stepped out in tailored jackets, their shoes too polished for these cracked sidewalks. The taller one adjusted his cufflinks, eyes locking on Marcus with a mix of recognition and ownership. "Mr. Cole," he said smoothly, like the name was still on his payroll. "We've been looking for you." Marcus said nothing. The second man smiled, a smile that never touched his eyes. "The world's on fire with your name again. You've got an opportunity here. Redemption, exposure, money," the cook muttered under his breath. "Here it comes." Claire crossed her arms, defensive. "Marcus doesn't need vultures," but the taller man ignored her. "We can put you back on billboards, Marcus. Back in commercials. Maybe even a trackside seat. Not as a racer, you're too broken for that. But as a face, as a story. Think of it. The lightning returns. The words cut. Marcus's fists curled, his knuckles whitening. You think I'm some brand you can dust off, slap on a poster, and sell again? The man's smile thinned. That's exactly what you are. The cook slammed his rag on the table. He ain't for sale. Man's a legend, not your pawn. The second man chuckled coldly. Legends without contracts end up forgotten. He should be grateful. Marcus stepped forward, his limp pronounced, but his stare unshakable. I'd rather be forgotten than be your ghost. For a moment, silence reigned. The Mustang's hood reflected the first beam of sunrise, casting a sharp glare across Marcus's face. The taller man's expression hardened. Think carefully, Cole. This isn't just about you anymore. The story's out. If you don't shape it, we will. And when we do, the world will know only the version we sell. The SUV door closed with a dull thud. The men climbed back inside, the vehicle rolling away with the same quiet menace as before. Claire exhaled sharply, turning to Marcus. They're right about one thing. The story's out. You can't run from it. Marcus's eyes followed the SUV until it vanished around the corner. Then he looked down at his hands. The same hands that once gripped a wheel at 200 miles an hour. The same hands that fixed 2 broken engines in a single night. No, Marcus said softly, I can't run from it, but maybe I can drive through it. The cook tilted his head. Sounds like a man ready to pick his own road. Marcus met his gaze, something fierce flickering back into his eyes. Maybe it's time the world saw the truth. Not the one they want to sell, but the one I still carry. And for the first time in years, Marcus didn't look beaten. He looked ready for a new race. Morning stretched across the city, warming the cracked pavement where Marcus still stood. The crowd from the night before had thinned, but not the whispers. His name was everywhere now, bouncing from phone to phone, from diner counter to office cubicle. Claire was pacing, phone buzzing with calls she kept swiping away. The cook leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes locked on Marcus like a pit crew waiting on their driver. Marcus sat on the curb, jacket draped over his knees, staring at the Mustang parked in silence. The reflection of the rising sun skimmed across the hood, catching his tired face in the glass. For a moment, he didn't see his ragged clothes or the lines carved by years of hardship. He saw the racer he once was. Claire stopped pacing. Marcus, listen to me. You don't have the luxury of silence anymore. If you don't speak, others will. They'll twist you into something you're not. Marcus looked up at her, his voice low but steady. All my life, other people spoke for me. Sponsors, teams, agents. They called me the lightning like I was just a spark to burn bright and die fast. Maybe it's time I speak for myself. The cook cracked a smile. About time. Claire's face softened. Then what are you going to do? Marcus rose slowly, legs stiff but spirit unbroken. He stepped toward the Mustang, laying a hand on the hood. I can't race again. Not the way I used to. But I can still teach. I can still fix. I can still inspire. Not for fame, not for contracts, but for the kids who look at a track and see possibility instead of a dead end. The cook nodded, his eyes glinting with pride. Sounds like a man who's about to start his second lap, Claire sighed, torn between relief and frustration. Do you know what you're risking, Marcus? Walking away from money, security? Marcus cut her off gently. I've walked away from finish lines before, but this time, I'm walking towards something that matters. The Mustang gleamed under the sunlight, engine ready, like it too understood the choice. Marcus straightened his shoulders, no longer the broken man begging for food, but a racer reclaiming his dignity. He turned to the small circle still lingering, phones raised, hearts caught between disbelief and hope. His voice rang clear, steady as a revving engine at the line. You want a story? Here's the truth. Legends aren't built by trophies. They're built by getting back up when the world leaves you behind. I'm Marcus Cole. I was the lightning, and I'm still here. The cook clapped firm and proud. Claire blinked hard, fighting the swell in her chest. Even the young man who had mocked him first lowered his phone, shame melting into respect. For a heartbeat, the street was silent. Then a horn blared in the distance, a truck rushing by, and the spell broke. But Marcus's words remained, etched into the air like tire marks on asphalt. The cook grinned. Guess the storm's rolling back in, Lightning. Marcus smiled faintly, pulling his jacket tighter. Not a storm, a new road. He walked toward the diner not as a shadow of who he once was, but as a man ready to write his own story, on his own terms. And behind him, the Mustang's engine roared once more, like a promise that legends never truly die. Moral payoff. Marcus refused to sell himself to old sponsors or hide in shame. Instead, he reclaimed his dignity, choosing to inspire others and define his own legacy.